Michael Sinclair sat at his desk, staring blankly at the computer screen. The numbers and figures in front of him held no meaning as his mind raced, replaying the conversation he had overheard just an hour earlier. It had started out as a normal day at the office. Michael had arrived early, as usual, determined to get a head start on the mountain of work that seemed to accumulate daily. He had been reviewing a report when the muffled voices of his wife, Emily, and her colleague, Jacob, had drifted in from the hallway outside his office. At first, Michael had paid little attention, assuming it was merely a work-related discussion, but then, the tone of their voices had shifted, becoming more intimate, more charged with emotion. His heart had begun to pound as he strained to hear the words, a growing sense of dread building within him. "I can't keep living this lie," Emily had whispered, her voice laced with guilt. "I have to tell Michael the truth." "No, you can't," Jacob had responded, his voice low and urgent. "It would destroy everything. Our careers, our families, everything we've built together." Michael had felt the floor shift beneath him as the reality of the situation dawned on him. His wife, the woman he had loved, trusted, and built a life with, was having an affair with her coworker. The very foundation of his world had been shattered in an instant. Pushing his chair back, Michael had risen on shaky legs, his mind reeling. He had to confront them, to demand the truth, to understand how this could have happened. But the thought of losing Emily, of having his daughter Isabel's world torn apart, paralyzed him with fear. Now, alone in his office, Michael stared at the blank screen, his hands trembling. He knew he couldn't ignore what he had heard. The betrayal was too deep, the pain too raw. But the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty, and Michael felt utterly adrift, uncertain of how to proceed. One thing was clear: his life would never be the same. The happy, stable home he had cherished was now a fragile illusion, and Michael knew he would have to summon every ounce of strength to navigate the turbulent waters that lay ahead. The following morning, Michael woke with a heaviness in his chest, the events of the previous day weighing heavily on his mind. He had barely slept, tossing and turning as he grappled with the devastating realization of his wife's infidelity. Determined to uncover the full truth, Michael decided it was time to confront Jacob's wife, Sarah. Gathering the meager evidence he had, a few snippets of the overheard conversation, Michael steeled himself for the confrontation. As he drove to Sarah's house, Michael's heart raced. He had never imagined he would find himself in such a position, forced to reveal his wife's betrayal to another innocent party. But he knew he had to do it, for the sake of his daughter Isabel and his own sanity. When Sarah answered the door, Michael could see the confusion and concern etched on her face. "Michael, what a surprise," she said, her brow furrowing. "What brings you here?" "Sarah," Michael began, his voice trembling slightly, "I'm afraid I have something difficult to discuss with you." Sarah gestured for him to come in, and the two of them settled onto the sofa, the tension palpable in the air. "It's about Emily and Jacob," Michael continued, his gaze meeting Sarah's. I overheard them yesterday. They're having an affair." Sarah's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "No, that can't be true," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "I'm afraid it is," Michael replied, his heart heavy. "I heard them talking about it. They're trying to keep it hidden, but I know the truth." Sarah sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing the information. Then, her expression hardened, and Michael could see the anger and betrayal in her eyes. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "How could they do this to us? To our families?" Michael nodded, understanding the depth of her pain. "I don't know," he admitted, his own anguish evident. But I knew I had to tell you, Sarah. We need to decide how to move forward from here." The two of them sat together, united in their grief and determination to uncover the full extent of their spouse's deception. Michael knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he was grateful to have Sarah by his side, someone who understood the devastation they were facing. As they discussed their next steps, a sense of solidarity began to grow between them, a shared resolve to protect their families and find a way through the turmoil that now consumed their lives. The meeting with Sarah had left Michael feeling a complex mix of emotions, anguish over the betrayal, but also a sense of camaraderie with this woman who was equally devastated by her spouse's infidelity. Together, they had decided that the next step was to confront Emily and Jacob directly, armed with the evidence they had uncovered. Michael knew this would be the hardest part, facing the people he had once trusted, the ones who had shattered the very foundation of his life. But he also knew that he couldn't continue living in the dark, unaware of the full truth. As he and Sarah made their way to the office, the tension in the car was palpable. Neither of them spoke, each lost in their own thoughts and fears about the impending confrontation. When they arrived, Michael took a deep breath before leading Sarah to Emily and Jacob's shared office. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he knocked on the door, bracing himself for the moment of truth. "Emily, Jacob, can we have a word with you both, please?" Michael called out, his voice surprisingly steady. The door opened, and Emily's face paled as she caught sight of Michael and Sarah standing there. "Michael, what are you doing here?" she stammered, her eyes darting nervously. "We need to talk," Sarah interjected, stepping forward. "About the affair. We know the truth." Jacob's expression mirrored Emily's, his facade of composure crumbling as the gravity of the situation sank in. How did you find out?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't matter how we found out," Michael replied, his gaze hardening. "What matters is that we know the truth now, and we're here to put an end to this." Emily and Jacob exchanged a panicked look, realizing that their carefully constructed web of lies had been exposed. "This is going to destroy everything," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Our careers, our families. You should have thought of that before you betrayed us," Sarah snapped, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and fury. The four of them stood there, the weight of their actions pressing down on them, the air thick with tension and recrimination. Michael knew that this confrontation was just the beginning. The true challenge would be navigating the aftermath and finding a way to protect his daughter from the fallout. As he looked into the eyes of his wife, Michael felt a profound sense of loss, a deep well of pain that threatened to overwhelm him. But he also knew that he had to be strong, for Isabel's sake, and for the sake of his own healing. With a heavy heart, he steeled himself for the difficult conversations and decisions that lay ahead. The confrontation with Emily and Jacob had left Michael reeling, his world turned upside down by the betrayal. As he drove home, his mind raced, trying to make sense of the shattered trust and the devastating revelation that his wife had been unfaithful. When he arrived, Michael found Isabel waiting for him, her expression one of concern. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowed. Michael hesitated, unsure of how to broach the subject with his young daughter. "Isabel, sweetheart," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "We need to talk. There's something important I need to tell you." Isabel's eyes widened as she saw the pain etched on her father's face. "What is it, Dad? What's happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. Michael took a deep breath, steeling himself for the difficult conversation. "It's about your mother and I," he said, his gaze meeting Isabel's. "Your mother. She's been having an affair with her co-worker Jacob." Isabel's face crumpled. tears welling in her eyes. "No, that can't be true," she cried, her voice laced with disbelief and anguish. Michael reached out, pulling his daughter into a tight embrace as she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Isabel," he murmured, his own tears threatening to break free. "I wish I didn't have to tell you this, but you deserved to know the truth." They sat there together, father and daughter, their hearts heavy with the weight of this revelation. Michael knew that this was only the beginning, that the fallout from Emily's betrayal would reverberate through their family in ways he could scarcely imagine. When Emily arrived home, the tension in the air was palpable. Michael stood in the living room, his expression stern as he watched his wife enter. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and measured. Emily's face paled as she read the anger and hurt in his eyes. "Michael, she began, but he cut her off. "No, you don't get to speak yet," he snapped, his resolve crumbling. "How could you do this to our family, to Isabel? I never meant for it to go this far," Emily pleaded, her eyes filled with tears. "It just happened. I didn't plan for this to happen." Michael let out a bitter laugh, the sound devoid of any humor. "That's not good enough, Emily. You betrayed my trust, our marriage, everything we built together. How am I supposed to forgive that?" The two of them stood there, the gulf between them growing wider with every passing moment. Michael knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was determined to find a way to protect his daughter, even if it meant the end of his marriage. As the evening wore on, the tension only escalated, with accusations and recriminations flying back and forth. Michael could feel his control slipping, the simmering anger threatening to boil over. He knew he had to find a way to regain his composure, to steer the conversation towards a resolution, but the pain was too raw, the betrayal too deep. Finally, exhausted and resigned, Michael uttered the words that would change the course of their lives forever. "I want a divorce, Emily. I can't do this anymore." The aftermath of Michael's confrontation with Emily had been tumultuous, their once loving relationship crumbling under the weight of her infidelity. In the days that followed, the tension in their household had become palpable, Isabel caught in the middle of their bitter arguments and recriminations. Michael had tried to find a way to salvage their marriage, to somehow move past the betrayal, but the trust had been irreparably shattered. Every time he looked at Emily, he was haunted by the image of her and Jacob tangled in a secretive embrace, the thought of it making his stomach churn. As the divorce proceedings began, Michael found himself struggling to navigate the emotional and legal complexities of dissolving his family. Isabel's welfare was his primary concern, and he fought tooth and nail to ensure that she would be protected from the fallout of their crumbling relationship. Meanwhile, Sarah had been a constant source of support during this tumultuous time. The two of them had bonded over their shared pain, their weekly meetings serving as a lifeline as they each grappled with the aftermath of their spouse's betrayal. One evening, as Michael and Sarah sat together in a dimly lit cafe, the weight of their situations seemed to hang between them. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," Sarah confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Seeing Jacob every day at the office, pretending that everything is normal, it's tearing me apart." Michael reached across the table, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "I know, Sarah. Believe me, I understand. This whole thing has been a nightmare." Sarah looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What are we going to do, Michael? How do we pick up the pieces and move on from this?" Michael sighed, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "I wish I had the answer, but I'm just as lost as you are. All I know is that I can't stay here, not anymore. I need a fresh start, somewhere far away from all of this." Sarah nodded, her expression pensive. "I've been thinking the same thing, actually. Maybe we could start over together, somewhere new. Michael's eyes widened, the implication of her words sinking in. You mean, like, leave everything behind and start a new life? Yes, Sarah replied, her voice steady. I can't stay here, Michael. I need to get away from Jacob and all the memories of what we had, and I don't want to do it alone. Michael sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of Sarah's proposal weighing heavily on him. Then, slowly, a glimmer of hope began to take root within him. All right, he said, a determined set to his jaw. Let's do it. Let's start over, somewhere far away from all of this. As they discussed the details of their plan, Michael felt a sense of cautious optimism beginning to take hold. The idea of a fresh start, away from the pain and the memories, was increasingly appealing, and with Sarah by his side, he knew that he wouldn't have to face this new chapter alone. With a deep breath, Michael made the decision that would irrevocably change the course of his life. In the weeks that followed their decision to start anew, Michael and Sarah had been working tirelessly to make their plan a reality. The divorce proceedings were still ongoing, but they had made the bold choice to leave their old lives behind and embark on a new journey together. The decision had not been an easy one, especially when it came to breaking the news to their respective children. Isabel had been devastated by the impending divorce, and Michael had grappled with the guilt of uprooting her from the only home she had ever known. One evening, as Michael and Sarah sat across from Isabel and Sarah's children, the weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. Kids, Michael began, his voice soft but resolute, your mother and I have something important to discuss with you all. The children exchanged wary glances, sensing the gravity of the situation. Your father and I have decided that it's time for us to start a new chapter, Sarah said, reaching out to squeeze Isabel's hand. What do you mean? Isabel asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Michael took a deep breath before continuing. We're moving, Isabel. All of us. We're going to start a new life in Raleigh, North Carolina. Isabel's eyes widened, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. But Dad, what about our home? What about my friends? She cried, her voice wavering. I know it's a big change, sweetheart, Michael said, his heart itching at the thought of Isabel's distress. But your mother and I believe this is the best thing for all of us. We need a fresh start, somewhere far away from the pain we've been through. Sarah's children were equally stunned by the news, but Michael could see the glimmer of hope in their eyes as well. They, too, had been suffering under the weight of their parents' crumbling marriage, and the prospect of a new beginning seemed to offer a sense of relief. But what about Dad? Isabel asked, her voice small. What about Mommy? Michael reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Your mother and I have decided to get a divorce, Isabel. This move is part of that process, but I promise you, it doesn't mean we love you any less. Tears began to stream down Isabel's cheeks, and Michael felt his heart break at the sight. He gathered her into his arms, holding her tightly as she cried. It's going to be okay, sweetheart, he murmured, his own voice thick with emotion. I know it's hard, but we're going to get through this. Together. As the family sat in silence, save for Isabel's quiet sniffles, Michael could see the apprehension and uncertainty in the children's faces. But there was also a glimmer of something else, a cautious optimism, a willingness to embrace the unknown. So, when do we leave? One of Sarah's children asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Michael and Sarah exchanged a meaningful glance, their resolve strengthening. As soon as possible, Sarah replied, her hand finding Michael's and giving it a gentle squeeze. We're ready to start our new life. As the moving van pulled away from the curb, Michael stood on the front steps of their new home in Raleigh, North Carolina, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The weight of the past few months had taken a heavy toll, but now, with a fresh start on the horizon, he felt a glimmer of hope begin to take root. Beside him, Sarah stood with Isabel and her own children, their eyes filled with a mix of trepidation and excitement. It had been a difficult decision to uproot their lives and leave everything behind, but as they looked around at the quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, a sense of cautious optimism began to take hold. "Well, this is it," Michael said, turning to face the group. "Our new beginning." Sarah reached out and squeezed his hand, her expression softening. "It's going to be okay, Michael. We're in this together, no matter what." Isabel, who had been quiet for most of the journey, finally spoke up. "Do you really think we can be happy here, Dad?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. Michael knelt down, pulling his daughter into a warm embrace. "I do, Isabel. I know it's been hard, but this is our chance to start over, to build something new. And I promise I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you're happy." The young girl nodded, her eyes still shimmering with unshed tears, but a glimmer of hope beginning to shine through. As they stepped inside their new home, the rooms still empty and echoing, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. The road ahead would not be an easy one, but he was determined to make this work, for Isabel, for Sarah, and for himself. In the days and weeks that followed, the family slowly began to settle into their new surroundings. There were moments of laughter and joy, as well as times of sorrow and uncertainty, but through it all, they leaned on one another, forging a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as Michael and Sarah sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues, he turned to her with a small smile. "You know, I think we're going to be okay," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of relief and wonder. Sarah returned his smile, her hand finding his. "I knew we would be. We may have had to make the hardest decision of our lives, but look at what we've built together." Michael nodded, his gaze sweeping over the peaceful neighborhood, the weight of the past slowly dissipating. "It's not going to be easy, but I'm ready to face whatever comes our way," he said, his voice filled with renewed determination. "As long as we have each other, I know we can get through anything." And so, with their newfound family by their side, Michael and Sarah embarked on a journey of healing, discovery, and the promise of a brighter future. In the face of betrayal and heartbreak, what gives us the strength to start anew and forge a path towards happiness? Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If you found this story resonant, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps us bring stories that inspire and challenge us all.